now?
It's still like dark here right now. It's like pitch black outside.
Really?
Yeah.
I saw that you just moved up to Canada. How is that? How is it different than working in the US?
Oh, it's very different. I moved back home January 2020, so it's been like a year, almost 2 years. It is a lot different. I miss the US. I was there this past weekend, and it was just so nice to be back, and
Yeah.
Felt kind of like home.
Which is interesting because you're not from the US.
Yeah, I'm from Canada, Vancouver. So I grew up just outside, about half hour, in a town called Port Coquitlam, and grew up there my whole life. But it was always my dream to go to the US and play sports there. And obviously I wanted to stay there and work there. And I did for a little bit, but it's super hard to get a work visa and I wasn't in the right job. So I had really no choice but to move home.
So talk me through the very beginning of your athletic history. I mean, what did your parents start you in and how did you get to javelin?
Yeah. So when I was when I was 5, I think is when I first joined I did like gymnastics and dance and stuff, but at 5 I joined soccer and loved it, loved playing sports. And there's a sport in Canada called ringette, and it's similar to hockey, but it's pretty much just for girls. So when I was 6, I started playing ringette and soccer. Loved ringette, probably more than soccer, but I played the two for years. And then I don't remember what age, but I was doing ringette, and then I would do field hockey in the spring. And then I would do ringette and field hockey and lacrosse. And I was also doing like cross country in school and wrestling in school and swimming in school. So I kind of did everything I could get my hands on. And then when I was 12, I wanted to join track and field, but that was a much bigger commitment. So my mom was like, if you do track and field, you can't do any other spring sports. So at 12, it became ringette and track and field. And at that age, you do every event. So in like a weekend, you're like doing 8 events, you're running, you're doing distance, you're throwing, you're jumping, and it's just so much fun. And I just fell in love with track, and I fell in love with the individual sport and the people. It was so different than anything I'd ever done. Then I'm 15, and my track coach looks at me and like shows me some paperwork and says, this is how close you are to making Team Canada. This is how close you are to getting a scholarship to the US, but you can't do both sports, because I would have had to do both 5 days a week. And it was almost like a no-brainer. So I went through tryouts in the fall for ringette and made the team. And then my coach like, got to make a choice. So I said, oh yeah, no-brainer. I'm doing track full time. And the September of 2012, and I kind of never looked back. And I jumped right into track and field full time. And honestly, it worked out. I made Team Canada the next year, and then again in my senior year of high school. And then I got my scholarship to the United States. So that is how I ended up throwing javelin.
Let's take a step back. How did you make the jump from a whole bunch of team sports into an individual sport that you ended up excelling at?
Well, I didn't actually excel at first. That is a good point. So at first I loved how it was all on you. But at 15 is when I also had to see a sports counselor for the first time, because I was getting so burnt out. I would have a meltdown after every track meet. And I was kind of always reinforced growing up that like I had to be the best one out there and I always had to win. And it's much harder in an individual sport when you really can't control what anyone else does. So I guess less than a year after choosing just track in an individual sport, I go and see a sports counselor. And oh my God, like absolutely changed my life. Like the biggest shift was, instead of focusing on being the best, I shifted to just doing my best. And once I really believed that, it was a totally different game. Like I stopped crying after every meet. My performance improved and I was so composed, and it was unreal. Like I recommend it to anybody ever, how much it changed my life. And then even to this day, like that's still in my mind when I get those feelings of like, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough. And I'm like, wait a sec. No, I just need to do my best. And that's all I need to do.
So how old were you when you first started working with that counselor?
So I was 15. And he actually says like, he normally doesn't take clients that young because your brain is still developing. But he did. I'm so grateful he did, because it literally saved my track career.
What were you going through? I mean, was it pre-performance anxiety? Was it a fear of not fitting in or not being the best? I mean, what were you working through at 15 when you really had not had enough time to even be really good at that sport?
It was just not being the best and not being as consistently dominant as I think I used to be in other team sports. And like, here's a good example, actually. When my best track meet ever was on the biggest competition of my life. I was on Team Canada. It was Pan American Junior Championships, and it was a pretty stacked field. And any other like year, like about 50 meters would have placed you on the podium, and I really wanted to be on that podium. And I go out there and I have a huge personal best, 49 meters, 164 feet, and I placed 7th. And yet, if it was like pre-sports counseling, Teagan, I would have been like devastated. I came 7th. But I'm like, in that day, I literally had the best meet in my entire life, and there was nothing more I could have done. So I was like so happy that day. And I think that kind of sums up what sports counseling had done to me. It just helped me focus on doing my best and knowing I can't control what anyone else does, and just dial into my zone and my plan. And that's how well it worked for me.
Who put you on to sport counseling? Was it your coach or was it your parents picking up on some kind of either thought process or articulation of an issue that was happening?
So it was my mom. One of her coworkers had been working with this counselor and said, you should really try it for Teagan, because I was literally having an absolute meltdown after every track meet, no matter really what place I came in, no matter really what I threw. And I honestly kind of felt helpless because I didn't want to be crying like that after every meet. And I did want help, and I wanted this to stop. And I don't really think I ever thought I could have made the shift that I did. Like, I didn't really expect to be like so friggin' composed. But that, my mom, and I'm grateful she recommended him and that it was able to work out. And I don't know, I kept working with him too all throughout my career.
That's really awesome. So let's also talk about the World Youth Championship in 2013. How old were you at that point?
I was 16. So that was kind of the meet that my coach was like, this is where you can make Team Canada, but you kind of have to quit ringette.
And then the 2015 Pan Am Junior Championship, that was the one you were just talking about.
Yes.
Okay, that's awesome. How did you get hooked up with Team Canada in the first place? I mean, what did they see in you?
So to make Team Canada in Canada, for those teams, what they do is they set out standards in maybe like the fall. So they set out like a list of standards for each event. And then typically you have to be top 2 in the country by a certain date, maybe like June-ish if the meet's in July. So for a long time, you kind of know the standards you have to hit. And most of the time you have to like exceed the standards because a lot of people are going to make it. So I'll talk about the 2013 Youth Track and Field Championships. That was in Ukraine. And that was what I was working for all season. Like, I quit ringette for this. I'm all in. So I obviously would have had to have a personal best that season. I'm trained. I think the standard was like 52. And I'm pretty sure I get hit 52 pretty early on in the season, but I was ranked 3rd in Canada. So I knew I had to keep getting a personal best to get into 1st or 2nd to make this team. And there actually was a tough moment in, I think, April. The ringette team that I had quit ended up becoming national champions. And that was a really tough moment for me because I hadn't made Team Canada yet, and I realized what I had missed out on. And I was so happy for them, but really sad that I didn't get to be a part of that, and I made this big sacrifice, and it hasn't really paid off yet. So I remember like being really sad when I heard that news, but I just kept doing the season, and I was going like to every single meet chasing this standard, like every weekend. I was going to Vancouver Island, taking a ferry to do meets over there. I was doing last minute meets anywhere I could find them. And I'm still in 3rd place, and there's one meet left. And also I could have made it So I was a javelin and hammer thrower at that age. So right now I was in third place for hammer, and I think third in javelin as well. So I was just here when I really wanted to be here. So last meet, I was really working the sports counselor because obviously this is do or die. And it was actually a crazy exercise we did. So we visualized it. He's walking me through the whole meet I was about to go to. And right when I had like my final throw, he says, and you don't make the team. And I start crying when I'm just doing this visualization because I'm like, oh, because I thought, of course, he said I was going to make the team. And then I cried and cried and cried and kind of experienced what it was like to not make the team. And I'm like, I really don't want to feel this way. So I was so dialed in. I had visualized. I was doing everything right to make this team. And first it was javelin, and I literally like threw my heart out. I remember trying so hard one throw, I even like tripped on the runway, and I didn't have a great javelin meet, so I wasn't going to World Youth for javelin. And now I was literally down to the last day of the last meet and my last event, and I'm throwing, and it just feels like any other day. Like I'm not more nervous than usual. I'm like pretty composed, and I throw and I get a mark, and I beat second place by 3 centimeters. So like maybe an inch or two. And that was it. And that throw had qualified me for Team Canada. So now I'm ranked second and just waiting for the qualifying period to end, which was a few days later. And then Team Canada sends out their official notification. And I had made Team Canada by 3 centimeters at 16 years old. And it was like the best feeling of my entire life. And nothing will ever, ever, ever compare to the moment of putting on your national team gear for the first time. It's just a pride and a feeling that I'll never forget. And I still have my jersey hanging out in my room, and it was the proudest moment of my life.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. And then work me through the rest of that season. I mean, what was being on Team Canada like?
Amazing. So the meet was in Ukraine. So me and they actually, because they had to separate, like it was like all the British Columbia people and all the rest of Canada flew together. So I'm at the airport with about like, I don't know, a fifth of the team. And we're all like super excited 16-year-olds traveling to Europe for the first time. And it was like 3 flights to get there. And it was my first time really out of the continent. I'd been to America before, never anywhere else. We get to Ukraine and we're in this like 5-star hotel. There's all countries from around the world, and everyone's just probably wearing their gear, and you can tell what country people are from. I think we were there for about 10 days, and yeah, it's also very different competing at that level because it's not like you just show up and you check in with the official and you start throwing in like 10 minutes. At these kind of meets, there's a warm-up track, so that's where you go warm up, and then they put you into the tents and they take attendance and they shuttle you off to the stadium. So it was different. My coach had like warned me about that and said this is how it is, and we did a couple of practices like that. And I just remember like there was like a huge field, like I think it was like 70-80 people in like 2 heats, ton of athletes. I've never been to a meet that big before, and you only get 3 chances. That's how it works. 3 chances in qualifying, and then top 8 get 3 more throws. And I knew I probably would only get 3 throws, and I just kind of went for it, and it was great. I still like the pictures, and looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was so young, and I'm so glad that dream came true for me. And that really was one of the highlights of my life, my track career for sure.
And then you follow it up in 2015. How did you get to the junior championship? And was that a similar process to what you had gone through in 2013, or was it different?
Yeah. And actually also the year in between that was the Youth Olympics in China. And obviously I really wanted to make that team, and I didn't. So I don't want to make my track career sound like it was a fairy tale, because there was definitely their share of disappointments. So 2014, I didn't make Team Canada. And then it's 2015, my senior year of high school. It's the fall, so I'm doing all my recruiting trips, and it's like so exciting, and like life is like right there. And there's Pan American Junior Championships, so this side of the world for 18 and 19-year-olds, a championship, and it's held in Edmonton, Canada. So I'm like, I'd get to be on a national team in my home country. Like that would be unreal. My parents could come, my family could come, although it'd be nice to go to somewhere hot. Home country's pretty cool too. So that was similar thing. There was a standard, and then you had to be top 2 in Canada by a certain date. And I think you had to like place top 2 at nationals. There was one more step. So my season honestly started really shitty. I think the standard was like 46, 47 meters. And I'm starting the season off throwing 41, 42. So I'm pretty far off where I need to be. But again, working with the sports counselor, still kind of believing I can do it and believing in that goal. And then there was kind of like a shift in the season. I drove down to Seattle for this meet after school, 3 hours in a car, and I got a personal best at this meet. And that's kind of when my season shifted. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can throw that far and I can reach for that. I don't remember the details. I'm pretty sure I was like sitting in third around that time. But I knew all it came down to was actually how I performed at nationals. So again, doing a lot of work with my sports counselor, knowing that like I cannot control what anyone else throws. And I'm at nationals, and I think I was in third, and there was 2 girls ahead of me. One was my training partner and one was a girl from Ontario, and we're throwing. And another girl from Ontario comes out of nowhere, and she's now in first place. So the 2 that were expected to win are now like not. And then I go and have another personal best, and I'm in second. So the 2 that were expected to win are now in third and fourth. And then the 2 that are in first and second weren't really expected to go there. And because of the order of the throwing, I had my personal best, and now my meet was done. I had my 6 throws, but those other 2 girls still had to throw. And in that moment, it's like, I have literally done everything I can, and I can't control if these girls throw further than me or not. And I think that moment of being so composed and just knowing and saying, I did my best, and that's it. And how proud I am of myself right now for getting a personal best is how I should walk away from this competition. Those girls didn't throw further, and I made Team Canada again. And I totally cried. Like, I'm so passionate about things, so I definitely cry when big moments happen, and that was one of them. And I couldn't believe it. And funny enough, that meet, it was in Edmonton, and that's where the Pan Americans were going to be too. So in that moment, I was like, in a few months, I'm going to be right back here wearing Team Canada, competing against the best from this side of the world. And that was how I made Pan American Juniors.
That's awesome. And while that was all happening, you were getting recruited to Virginia Tech.
Yes.
Why Virginia?
So my recruiting process went kind of like this. My dream was a Southern Pac-12 school. California, Arizona, just wanted to go somewhere hot, kind of West Coast. And I'm sending out emails to all these coaches, and I'm in touch with a lot of the places I want to go. But when it comes to like actually scheduling my visits now in the fall of my senior year, these coaches are kind of backing out or saying they don't have enough scholarship money, because as a Canadian, we would never ever pay 50 grand plus for education. Like, that's just unheard of. So I did need a huge scholarship to help with finances. So I knew my West Coast dream wasn't going to work out. So I kind of panicked, sent a bunch of emails off to coaches on the East Coast, and heard back from quite a few. And at Virginia Tech, my teammate at the time had won the 2015 NCAA. So I'm like, I would literally be training with the national champion and also a bunch of other good throwers. A lot of Europeans were there. So I started taking my visits. My first one is University of Kentucky. And I don't know if it was my first visit or what, but I go there and it's like a Canadian on an American campus for the first time and getting wowed, and everything is free. And I also was very determined to do these visits alone. So I'm flying across the United States as an 18-year-old and doing my college visits and meeting with academic advisors. Loved Kentucky. I'm like, I might go there. The next weekend I go to Virginia Tech, and it was even better. And I just meshed with the teammates. I really loved Blacksburg, loved the coach. And then came home. I'm like, I think it's Virginia Tech now. And then next weekend I went off to Mizzou, and I was like, this isn't the place for me. And I knew after like the 2 like really awesome visits, I go there, I'm like, this isn't really the best fit. And I think I had another visit with Duke and Ole Miss, but I knew by that point I was going to Virginia Tech. So I canceled those visits, and that's how I became a Hokie.
And then you stayed a year there. What made you transfer?
There's quite a few reasons. So I had just come off my great javelin performance. So I'm going in wanting to be a javelin thrower and not a hammer thrower, because I kind of put hammer off to the side after this javelin season. And so I threw 49 meters, so only a couple more meters, and I would like be close to being an All-American. So in my mind, I'm like, it's kind of a no-brainer that I just stick with javelin. And the coach there kind of had other plans and wanted me to be a hammer thrower. So I was throwing hammer like 4 days a week and javelin once a week. So track wise, I was pretty miserable. And then also like a lot of like naive freshman things. Like I'm on the other side of the continent alone for the first time in my life. And, you know, made like freshman mistakes and things like I wish that didn't happen. And also like gained a lot of weight, which is really tough on me too, because it was kind of like the wake up call. Like so everything I kind of learned in sports counseling, I kind of forgot about and should have applied, but just focusing on the externals and that kind of motivation. I knew by Thanksgiving I was 100% going to transfer. So it was pretty early on. I was set on it. I'm like, I don't really like it here. I don't really want to be here. It turned out not to be a good fit, but I also think underlying, I always wanted to go to the West Coast.
Was Arizona one of the West Coast teams that had originally offered you and had been in talks, but just couldn't offer you enough scholarship money, or was this a totally new conversation with that coach?
So the coach that was at Arizona was at Washington when I was in high school. And that's pretty commonplace for a lot of people from Vancouver to go because it's 3 hours away, but it's still another country. But my naive high school self was like, no, it's too close to home. Like I want to go somewhere hot. And looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, great city, great school. Like, why did I brush it off? But anyways, he then got the job in Arizona right after my freshman year. So I had this connection to this coach down in Arizona because transferring is kind of a risk because you request to transfer from your school and then you really hope another place picks you up. So I had this connection in the back of my mind in a hot school. So that's kind of how the transferring went. I requested my release, which is obviously a really hard conversation. And then I ended up in Arizona a few months later.
And then work me through your college experience at Arizona because it was a solid experience.
Yeah. So track wise did not go how I wanted. So my best ever throw was 49 meters in grade 12. Virginia Tech, I threw 48 meters. And then in that transfer, I think a part of me kind of died. Like my passion for track was gone. My heart was no longer into it. And I was fighting that. And I was wondering where it had gone. And it broke my heart because I do remember the summer between transferring that I was at a meet and I just like felt like I had nothing left. And it broke my heart because I wanted to be an All-American. I wanted to be on Team Canada again. And I had all these big goals. And so I transferred there and my coach is still obviously so fired up about having me there. And my first year just didn't really go that great. So I decided to redshirt. And I think I was kind of like, oh, it's still there. My passion's still there. My heart's still there. And honestly, it just never came back. So it's now my junior year and I'm like full-time into journalism now. That was always my plan to study journalism. And I'm really loving school. And this is the first time in life I've really liked it. Like I always got good grades, but never liked it as much as I liked the athlete part. But I kind of felt like I had no choice but to go find something else I was good at because track wasn't there. And it was so hard every single day practicing and putting my heart and soul into something that I see is like slowly fizzling out and feeling so helpless. And the thing that was different about that time of my life than when I was a teenager is I had no desire to really fix it anymore. I had no desire to see a sports counselor and solve this. I was beyond done. And I was like, now it's a way of paying for my school. And it's an amazing experience because it was always my dream to go to school summer hot on the West. And here I was. So for my junior year, just kind of like battled it out, did the meets, and it was tough because I kind of felt embarrassed in competition season because it was so far off what I knew I was capable of. And no matter how hard I tried or how bad I wanted it, it just did not work. I kept showing up, kept going. Then senior year, so I had redshirted. So I had a fifth year. And I always planned to do 5 years. And then I was like, you know what? I need to make sure academically I can be done in 4 if I want to be done in 4. And that's what ended up happening. So last year I was planned to be done my degree in 4 years. Track, like seriously, I went like this. Every year got a little bit worse. But fortunately, by my senior year, like I had accepted it, and it wasn't like really a shock. I was like, I'm having a degree and I have this experience, and that's kind of how I had to walk away from it.
Why do you think that your performance suffered the way that it did?
I really think it was my heart not being in it, and because I know the power of mental strength training and sports counseling, and like I know like when I don't want to be there, it's not really going to go well. So yeah, it was. I want to say, oh, it was something physical, but like I really think it was in my mind. Maybe a combination of a training plan that wasn't the best fit for me, but I didn't feel like I was getting better. And another thing is knowing my strengths as an athlete, looking back on my life, because I've had a lot of time to think about my athletic career, is my strengths as an athlete do not line up with throwing. Like I'm not a super explosive, big, strong person. I'm almost like average in every single like athletic skill. So I was much more suited when I played ringette, similar to hockey, and that's much more aligned with like my skill sets as an athlete. So also looking back now, I even surprised how much success I had in track and field. Like I really think a lot of it was pure will and determination. Like I would never like test well on it. Like when we'd have like testing day, I would always be like so far behind my teammates. It was so frustrating. So like I can't try as hard as I can. I'm just not gonna like explode and throw a ball as far as other people. So it was cool to see like I guess what you can will yourself to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's so interesting that you chose and just kind of went with it because you came to a crossroads where you're like, I have to pick one sport and have to just dedicate all of my time to this thing. And then looking back, do you think that you made the right decision?
I think about that a lot too. If I say I played lacrosse or played hockey or stuck with field hockey, I wouldn't have gone to Arizona. I would have probably gone to a Northeast school. And that's always something I wanted, was to go to school in the sun and to tan on my Saturdays and live under the palm trees. And that totally came true. But if I did another sport, I wouldn't have gone there and my life would have been completely different. So I don't know. I if I knew track went like that, I don't know, because I wouldn't have gone to Arizona, and like that is something that really meant a lot to me. And I know I can't go back. Sometimes I wish I kept with the ice sports, or even if I played ringette, I would have ended up just staying in Canada. So, and I think it all worked out how I meant to, and I had so many amazing experiences. Like, take track aside, I fell in love with journalism and met some unreal people like you through journalism. Like we would never met if I didn't go to U of A. And some of the experience I got to have outside of school and trips and friends I've met, I wouldn't have it any other way. As much as it hurt and broke my heart for years, and I cried so much about it, and like it's not like I didn't care and it didn't matter to me. It really mattered to me, and I really, really cared. And even to this day, like I could still cry about how much I missed track and how much my kind of heart aches how it went. Like it's something that really, really means a lot to me. So me thinking that I was just there for my degree and like slack as an athlete, not true. I put my heart into it every single day.
How receptive was U of A to sports psychology at the time that you were there? I mean, I know that over the past few years, the United States as a whole has gotten more receptive to it, and they have installed sports psychologists and counselors into athletic departments, but it hasn't always been like that even in the past 5 years. Was that something that the athletes had at their fingertips when you were there?
Yes. So at Virginia Tech, we had a sports psychologist on staff, and then at U of A, there was also one. This was my experience going to see her for the first time. She prescribed me antidepressants and told me to download this app for meditation. In our first meeting, and I came from working with a sports counselor who didn't prescribe medication because he can't. So I came from like just doing like homework and the visualization aspect. And then to go to another mental health practitioner and was given a prescription and an app to download, I like couldn't believe it. I'm like, how is this going to help me? Like, I came from the experience that I need to like mentally work through things, and to be given like kind of just felt like I was given band-aids, and like this isn't going to really help me with my athletic performance and what I'm going through. Like, this isn't solving like the root of why I'm struggling. So I never really saw her again after that, and there really wasn't anywhere else to get help. So there was help. I wouldn't say it was helpful help.
Was it Headspace? Was that what?
Yeah.
Was that the app?
Yeah.
I love Headspace, but it's not for everyone. I mean, meditation doesn't fix everything.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, I like meditation, great. Stress levels, zoning in, totally agree. But is that alone gonna help my heart breaking because of my athletic performance? Probably not.
And then was the same sentiment carried through it at Arizona?
Oh, what do you mean?
In terms of like sports psychology assistants.
Yeah, so that woman left after like a year or two. And then I never really went back to any of the other people because I was just like, that experience was like so bad. I'm like, and I knew track was over anyways. So I was like, I'll just top it out each day. It's like, it'll be done when I graduate.
Let's talk about athletic identity. How much of your continued participation, even as you are actively falling out of love with your sport, had to do with your identity as a Division I athlete?
Well, it was my dream. So every day I saw myself as a student athlete for as long as I can remember. And that was another really tough thing, especially as track got worse. I was like, oh my gosh, what else can I be? And that's when I became a journalist. But that's all I really ever wanted to be. And all I dreamed about since I was a kid was being an athlete at the highest level. So it was totally a part of who I am. And I really, really, really struggled with it as I watched it like totally fade away. And it forced me to see what else I'm good at. And it forced me to be like, oh my gosh, outside of being an athlete, I'm this and this and this. But that doesn't mean I still wanted to be an athlete so badly. Like, even to this day. And I've actually gone back to sports now as an adult, but it's like a part of me that's like, it's inside me. It's not just something I could be taken away. And I also realize now, like, I can still play sports as an adult too and still like have that piece. But I saw myself as an athlete. I still see myself as an athlete. But another thing I've learned is that, especially here in Canada, like, people don't give a fuck that I wasn't an All-American. Like, all they see is I went to U of A on a sports scholarship, and they think that's so freaking cool. But in my mind, I know how it went. But to 99% of the world, that doesn't matter.
Is that dichotomy difficult for you to like work through when on the surface everyone's like, oh my gosh, you're a Division I athlete, like you're on Team Canada, and you're like, well,
it depends. Like, if people are just kind of service level about it, then I'm just service level about it. I'm like, that was a great experience, loved it there, all true. But if they really like get into like the details, I'll be like, honestly, like, track went horribly in college. I got progressively worse every year, and I really had to focus on journalism. Like, that's the truth.
And then what kind of situations trigger you now, looking back on everything that you did in college and then previously? Now, as you go through your days, what kind of things make you stop in your tracks and say, I wish I was still an athlete? Or even if you don't say that, like, I wish I was back in that scenario.
So I have a journal that I write in all the time. And if I get in days where I start writing about my athletic experience, like, the waterworks will just come. So even when I think about my own life and start writing about it, I'm very emotional about it. watching some videos or other athletes' experiences, totally. Like, I remember I watched like Lindsey Vohn's documentary a few years ago, and that Game of the Waterworks too. Not necessarily looking at pictures and stuff, but just like when I just sit and like really deeply think about it or talk about it out loud, like that's when it started to bring up the tears.
When you see track and field in the Olympics, what do you feel like?
I still feel the excitement and the jitters that I felt as a kid. Like, it's so much fun to see like the best of the best, and to know what it takes to get there, and to know that these people had to be so dominant in their country and meet standards, and Americans, they have to perform at the trials, which I cannot imagine. Like, it's different in a lot of other countries. It's more of a trial period, but to know that these athletes are the best of the best, and to know that they're like pure athleticism. Like, I think that's what track and field is all about. It is pure. Are you fast? Do you have endurance? Are you explosive? Can you jump high? And that's what I love about the sport, is you can't like argue things. It's either there or it's there. You ran that or you ran that. I love track and field and watching the Olympics, and I still have a ton of friends who are there at a high level. So watching other people get their track career, it's really, really awesome to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have a lot of guests on this podcast who come from team sports. And team sports are incredibly subjective. You know, like flags are thrown, lines are crossed or not crossed, and there are sideline refs, and there are midfield refs, and there are umps who may call it a ball or may call it a strike. But I mean, in track, whoever runs the fastest, whoever throws the farthest wins. Was that easy to process? I mean, when you won/lost, because you know that you either succeeded rightfully or you didn't.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I fell in love with the sport, is I loved how it was pretty black and white. I don't really know what else to say to this one.
Yeah, I mean, you're the first track athlete that I've had on this podcast, and so I was pretty excited to talk to you, because I have not had that, I mean, such a definitive win-loss scenario other than track. And I think that that's what makes it so interesting and so unique as a sport.
Yeah, I agree. But then ironically, what happened is I found myself missing team sports.
Yeah, I mean, how did you circle back to team sports after you had spent so much time dedicated to an individual sport?
Well, it was kind of at a crossroads, because I wanted to work in the United States so bad, but also I knew if I wanted to play ringette again, like that was kind of only in Canada. So I ended up getting a work visa, which is a whole other story in itself. I was working down in the US after I graduated, and ended up moving home 6 months later, and then COVID hit. And I still, like, I live in Canada now. Like, I really want to play ringette again. So I reached out to the team. I was also back in my parents' house. So I reached out to the local team, and I was playing with the same girls I played with 8 years ago. And it was so crazy that like 8 years have come and gone, and here we are all in the same dressing room. And now we're all in university, and we drive ourselves to practice now. So I was playing with that group, and because of all the restrictions and everything, it was just practices. So actually not the worst thing ever for someone who hadn't played in 8 years, but it felt like I hadn't missed a beat. Like, I was right there, I was stabbing the ring, I was skating fast, and it felt so good to be back there. It kind of sucked there were no games, because that is the fun part, but I got to practice, and then I got the job I'm at now in Alberta, Canada. And Alberta was always super good at ringette. They always had a ton of girls that played, and they always would be really good teams. Even though I'm kind of in like a smaller town and not one of the cities, I knew there was going to be ringette here. And I joined again, and now I'm on a league with obviously all brand new like women and girls, and it is amazing to be back. Like, it makes me so happy. Like, I tear up when I talk about being back on the ice. And we had our first tournament a few weeks ago on the road, and I just could not believe I was on the road again for a ringette tournament with a group of girls sitting in a hotel. And it means so much more to me than just playing on a women's team. It means that the part of me that I thought died in college is still in me and alive and well. It means my passion is there. And the thing I love about team sports is I can play my freaking heart out on the ice, and I do, and I get the results. Like, I see my hard work pay off, where in track you work your heart out, but it doesn't always work out. So I find it's more rewarding that, like, you know, I have like a bad game, I play my heart out, I'm still kind of off the ice and I'm tired, and I knew I gave my all if it wasn't my best day, but track and field is kind of a different story.
And then what made you post that Instagram?
So I had been thinking
for me,
about
I
that,
mean,
yeah.
it felt like it came out of nowhere, but obviously, I mean, it was so articulate that it had been a thought process for a long time, it felt like. I mean, was there
Yeah.
one thing that set you on that trail and sat you down and said, oh, I'm gonna post this?
Obviously, I've been thinking about that for years and years and years. And I knew a lot of my athlete friends felt similar, but I don't know. We just, like, I never really saw posts about it. And I found my social media is very just like, oh, here's what I did today and here's this. But obviously, I'm a much more like in-depth and emotional person than that. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I want to make this vulnerable post because I've been feeling this so deeply, and playing again this weekend means so much. So I would like, the trigger for that post is obviously the tournament that was coming up. And I started out in my journal entries. So I'm like writing out what a caption would be. And as I'm writing this caption, I'm just like bawling, full on meltdown, uncontrollable tears as I'm writing this. And I'm like, oh my God, that felt so good. Because I was obviously so built up in me for so long. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to post this. I'm going to tell the world like that. Like, I think I honestly, I come across it like, oh, I transitioned so easily from track and field to being a journalist, but like, that's not the case. I didn't really want to give that perception that no, like, I've struggled and I've missed it and my heart aches for it. As much as I love my job now, it doesn't mean I can't still miss something. And I'm also so fortunate to be able to go back to a sport and have a sport to do and not kind of just be stuck with the gym, because going to the gym is much different than actually being an athlete on a team.
And on Team Canada, especially.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Oh, I think I kind of wrapped it up that the trigger was, I guess, playing in the tournament again and wanting to be honest. And I can't believe how many like comments and people I had reach out to me. Like, every athlete friend I've had my entire life like felt the same. So I think that's something that could be like more dealt with at like the college level. It's like everyone seems to have a tough time when you leave, and you try and prepare us by having a career, but why don't you prepare us when we don't have the sport we love anymore?
I know when I saw that post, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to DM her. But I went through the comments and I was like, these are a whole bunch of either current athletes or former athletes or just friends of you that were commenting like, I get it, I understand, my experience was so similar. I mean, what do you say to those people who might be listening and really resonating with your story?
Yeah, I couldn't believe like the variety of people, like pro athletes, current athletes, former athletes, like friends, parents of friends. I was touched that my story resonated with them, and I'm so glad that other people know they're not alone in this feeling. And like, I did not expect it to be like so well received, but because it was kind of helped. It was like part of the healing, I guess. I think, you know, I'm struggling, and so is everybody else. And sports is something that not everyone understands. Like, not every people who weren't athletes growing up don't really understand. They probably just like, why is she sad about missing a sport? But it's because it's our identity. We do this every single day, and it's a dream we think about 24/7 since we were kids. So when the day you graduate and it's over with, like, that kind of is a big shock.
What is next for you? And does it involve sport?
Yeah. So I think my dream since I was like a teenager was to be like a sportscaster, and I always wanted to study journalism and work in sports. And at this job I'm at right now, I'm the backup sports anchor, but mostly I cover news. And what I've learned at this job actually is I see news as my future. And I learned that I much prefer playing sports myself than watching other people. So maybe that's the beauty of what this job has taught me. but obviously I still have a huge passion for sports. So I'm playing right out again. I go to the gym every day and I'm coaching track and field. So I totally get my sports fix in. And then I love covering news. So what's exactly next to me, it's hard to say. I wanted to be at this job for at least a year to really build up that experience. And I'm at 7.5 months right now, 8 months. March will be my 1 year. And all I really want, I want to have sports in my life somehow. And I want to be in a city and make a difference. So it's pretty vague. I'm really open to going with my future, however it comes, going with the flow. Because my whole life was like athlete, schedule, training plan, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm like, I just want to make a difference and be in a city and have sports in my life. So I'm pretty open to anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's also strange, and I'd like to do an episode on this as well, going from total structure as an athlete to either entrepreneurship or a job that is really unstructured.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that would be a really interesting look. If there's anyone that you can think of that comes off the top of your head that you could like put me in contact with, like that would be really cool.
Yeah.
But I think that regardless, that would be an interesting episode because so much of sports and practice and competition is about structure. And then suddenly you have zero or very little
Yeah.
when you enter the workforce or go about your post sport experience.
Mm-hmm.
Was that difficult for you? And do you think that that was one of the things that drove you to journalism because there is a structure, there are deadlines?
Yeah, you know what? That's what I love about journalism. Like, I love how it's so like a self-starter is not the word, like initiation, I guess, especially when you're a beginner, because you gotta come up with your own stories, you gotta schedule everything yourself, you gotta write everything, do the interviews, edit everything, post on social media, present it yourself. So there's so many aspects, and you gotta do that every single day. Like there's no days off as a journalist. Even on your weekends, you still have to know what's going on in the world. And okay, when I was 15 and I wanted to be a sportscaster, I thought it was like, oh, I'm just gonna like talk on camera and be at sports practices all day. Obviously not the case. There's so much more to it. And when I learned how much more there was to it, that's actually when I fell in love with it. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like I was a naive teenager, but this is so impactful. This makes a difference in the world. It's a challenging and rewarding career, and also so freaking stressful. It's not an easy career, not only under the deadlines, but under public scrutiny every day and negativity. Like it can be draining, but I love how every day is different. I love how I learn something new every day. And I love how there's still, I guess, there's daily goals, like the daily goals of you have to get your story done, daily goals of it has to be done by this time. So it's kind of like that competitiveness in me, like gets to come out. And obviously so many other aspects that you gotta be good at scheduling your things. You have to be so organized and then manage your stress levels outside of work, because that's what ended up being the reason why I left my job in Arizona. Is I could not handle the stress anymore.
Do you think that as former athletes, they gravitate toward stressful jobs?
No, I don't think so. And I'm shocked that more athletes aren't in journalism, like maybe in sports journalism, but like in news journalism, like it's such a great fit for like type A personalities. But I think I have friends who have gone in every direction. Like some have gone off to like more schooling or sales. Like I don't know. I don't know if we like specifically go towards stressful jobs, but a lot of my friends are like doing very well and are successful and love their careers as much as they also probably miss their sport.
What would you tell 12-year-old you about the future prior to qualifying for any world championships while you were trying to figure out what sport you wanted to pursue?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what would you tell that little girl?
Oh my God, I'm like tearing up.
That was not the intent, but
no, I get really like emotional when I think about it and my journey. I wish I learned, and I'm still learning it, but learn to like love myself more, no matter what I did, like on and off the field, and not for any externals, just for being me. Because I was always chasing externals and the outcomes. And I wish I just like loved myself as I was. And I think that would have helped me with everything, because I wouldn't have had that pressure on me to have performed so well. I would have just playing because I loved it. I would have just gone after things because I loved it. I maybe I wouldn't tell myself to consider team sports a little bit more, but also you can't control passion. And I had the passion for track. Love myself more, take care of myself more, have a lot more confidence in myself, unrelated to externals, because that's the other thing. I would always crutch on those things, and rather than looking inwards and having that confidence and that love no matter what. Like those are things I wish I had, but at 12 years old, I'm not sure who really does.
Yeah, I mean, I think that your story is just going to resonate with so many people, and I got the feeling that it would based on the comments that you were getting on that Instagram picture. And I was like, I read your post and I read the comments and I was like, this is such an impactful story that I have to have her I have to have her work through it with me. And I'm so glad that you did.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was just so nice to talk about this, because every day I'm asking other people questions about their life, and yet I have like this story I've kind of always wanted to share.
Is there anything else that you think that I missed talking about that you would like to talk about before we conclude?
Yeah, I actually would. So
Okay.
when I moved back home in January 2020 from my stressful Arizona job, I knew I needed help. Like that was the most depressed I'd ever been in my entire life. I had never been so low, and I knew I desperately needed help. So I came home and I reached out to that sports counselor I worked with at 15, because out of all the people I had worked with throughout college, he was the only one that I really ever felt better working with and felt results with, and really noticed a shift. So that was 2 years ago. Oh my gosh. So, and he was retiring at the end of last year. So I'm like, if I ever work with him again, now is my chance. And this process has been a lot longer than I thought. I thought it'd be a few months and I'd be on my way. And I am still working with him to this day. So I'm still getting help. I'm not perfect, never will be, but I have learned so much about myself these last few years doing this counseling as an adult versus 15, because now I have all these life experiences behind me and more of an adult brain, and now I'm really seeing the difference. So I totally am like all for mental health and help, and I'm getting it and I'm noticing a difference, and I'm so grateful that I get counseling, because I know it's such a privilege, and also like being in Canada, a little more affordable and a little more accessible. And that's one of the reasons I didn't really get help when I was working in the US, because I made a journalism salary and had no benefits. So grateful to have help and totally encourage it. And I'm like totally like not afraid to talk about it, because it's helped my life so much. And I know a lot of other people that I've come across are so like opposed to it or hesitant to it. And I say, go for it. You have nothing to lose.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate with the athletes and team personnel that I've had on this podcast so far, because they're all very aware of what their story is and how to articulate their feelings throughout it.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had people comment on and direct message us and be like, this really resonated with me. Like I didn't even know that anyone else was like going through this. And like that's why I continue to tell stories like yours and like the 43 others that I've had. I mean, like I'm never going to run out of stories to tell as long as people are willing to be vulnerable. And I think that that was the first step in who you've become. I think that's really cool.
Well, thank you.
And just one more time, is there anything else that you think that I missed that you wanted to talk about prior to ending this episode?
I think I covered it. I think like my life growing up as an athlete and having dreams of going to a Southern Pac-12 school and studying journalism, it all worked out, and getting help again. And yeah, totally. Anyone can reach out to me anytime. I'll definitely reply if anyone has any questions or wants to share their story. I'll listen.
Awesome. And then if you could just just direct message me a picture of you that I could use for social media, and I'll
Ooh.
talk to you later. This
Okay, thank you so
this
much.
episode I think is actually coming out later today.
Ooh,
So we have
turnaround.
a quick turnaround, and the socials won't go out until tomorrow, so it's really not a big
Okay.
deal if you're like send them to me later tonight, but I'll get back in touch with you when the episode comes out.
Thank you. Would you prefer like more athletic picture or like nice picture?
I mean,
Mhm.
because the episode is primarily about you as an athlete, if you could give me a picture of that, but I have also
Okay.
had like professional headshots. It doesn't really matter,
Mhm.
just a picture that you feel confident in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for talking to me.
Of course. And if you need anything else or like have any other questions in the
Yeah,
future, like
same.
totally reach out. Thank
All
you.
right, bye.
Bye.
Have a good day.
You too.